It's 21:32 p.m. We're the 28th of October, and I intend to talk for, let's say, 30 minutes broadly about what I've understood about myself recently. I will repeat a sentence as long as I speak publicly, probably. I become smarter every day, every hour, and sometimes wiser, but also sometimes bitter and even resentful, because there's the ambiguity of the smarter I become. I look back, I see mistakes. I will not retell the story, but that's what I know, that's what I experience, simply because I incorporate experiences that I'm becoming older also. So that's the wisdom coming with growing older, I guess. But also I incorporate, when I can think more or less calmly, knowledge within my worldview, my system, etc. And I interpret this differently. So that's why I try to be honest. I say contradictory things because something is contradictory, because something is what it is, because it is connected to something else, and the limit is the distinction between the two. And I've made a lecture on logic in French, so yeah, but no, I will talk ordinarily. I say contradictory things because I keep evolving, I keep getting better. I'm not sure, but I keep developing and evolving. That's why one of the problems is that I have said many things. I've talked for hundreds of hours in my various videos on my various channels, and one of the problems that I suffer from, and that I will suffer from, is that maybe the whole process makes sense from my perspective because I live with my own consciousness, but if people just take bits, pieces here and there, it's unintelligible, probably. So yeah, but I cannot. I try to do this by showing the view of the system, etc. But I do this in my videos where I speak French. Maybe I will do this again in English, but as of now, what I want to say is, I will. First, when people speak on the internet, potentially anyone else can access whatever is being said. So it's not a private sphere, it's becoming public. So here I imagine myself talking to an American audience, actually to the few followers, the one or two persons who left comments, but actually I'm talking to anyone potentially. But I've tried to do this, and it's kind of correct formally, but there has to be elevation from the singular, the particular, the universal, step by step in a way, or maybe not, but in the sense that I could imagine myself talking to a 57-year-old peasant in Vietnam, but it's not that I wouldn't have anything interesting to say, maybe, but as of now I imagine myself talking to my followers, while knowing that potentially anyone at some moment will be able to hear this, maybe, or yeah. So I just want to give the keys, the psychological keys, to understand my process, knowing that it's at this moment in time, and as long as I can think and speak and express myself, I will keep evolving, maybe contradicting myself. But now, how I understand this, after having spent a few days in the French mind, one might say, yeah, I've just taken a few notes for a few dozens of minutes. What I can say is that I give the keys as of now to make most of my videos more intelligible. I have suffered as an individual. Now I give my name usually, but I will speak now. I will not say my empirical self. I will say Luca. That's my name. I have suffered as an empirical individual, in my empirical life, as the absence of a father. I will not go into the complex metaphysical, the consciousness gives rise to the world. No. If I speak empirically, that's the first moment. It has then to be aufgehoben, maybe negated while preserved, but as an empirical individual, I have suffered from the absence of a father and the absence of a father figure. That there are the two. I have my biological official father died when I was officially 3 years old, and I grew up in a society, in a civilization with no father figure. That's why my singular problem is particular to the West, namely the lack or the absence of a strong father figure. The father who embodies authority, strength, and there are historical reasons why. I will not make a history of the 20th century, but the last time that a European, a Westerner, but he was a European, anthropologically tried to assert himself, well, it brought a lot of trouble. That's one of the reasons. I will not make the history of the second half of the 20th century, the Cultural Revolution, but basically that's the story. To make the world intelligible, one has to understand that the West suffers from the lack of a strong political figure, and the revival of a strong archetype is Donald Trump in 2016. That explains politics, geopolitics very simply. So yeah, I also empirically, I am afraid of embarrassing people, and I tend to experience shame, guilt, and remorse very easily. And that's why I fear to assert myself. But there are things which I think really are embarrassing, etc. But I have, that's my ambiguity, is that I am perfectly aware that there are things which are really embarrassing. But I'm sometimes embarrassed. I am afraid and to embarrass others for being myself without thinking that it's really negative before I encounter negativity. I will illustrate. How should I explain this? An empirical example drawn from my life empirically in France. When it was a couple of months ago, maybe, or a couple of months probably, when I started to talk about the categories to a person. It was in how do you call this? Where you buy medicine and drugs, medicine drugs. I don't know, pharmacy. I don't know how you call this in English. But I talked to the person about the categories, and I noticed that she was embarrassed. For myself, I don't know, but she probably thought, okay, I am embarrassing her while talking about my metaphysics, etc. And that's when I realized this is the kind of thing that I do not want to assert myself for fear of embarrassing the other, although these are the kind of things that I do not find embarrassing as such. Talking about metaphysics, talking about my system, making some jokes, talking about race realism, talking about sociobiology, talking about some controversial topics which are moderately controversial, but sometimes very controversial depending on the social context, like the sciences. Talking about science, it includes metaphysics. I have been afraid to assert myself, or simply to assert myself in a sense, I have interesting things to say. I am worthy of your time when I decide so. I have been, and I still am afraid to assert what I consider good aspects about me. Then there are more what I call the twisted aspect. I am not willing to share. I mean, actually I am, because I have shared this on the internet, but in a day-to-day, face-to-face interaction, this is called not politeness, but a sense of restraint, in a sense that there are some twisted aspects that I'm not willing to share with some people. There has to be a acquaintance, yeah. And then of course there are really negative, embarrassing aspects, that the subconscious, the really embarrassing things that I am vaguely aware of and that even I'm not completely aware of. Really, the the shameful aspects, but I have to accept them because it's part of the totality. But I have been afraid to accept my own embarrassing aspects, which are not really negative, which are twisted. Yeah, and this is one of my problems. I have the tendency always to retreat when I encounter people, to say, okay, if I don't want to, it's kind of very silly, but I have had the opportunity last year when I was socialized to talk about history, the Roman Republic, etc., with a person that I consider not a friend, but a friendly acquaintance. And I was not willing to insist, because this is what really interested me, but I said, okay, if that's not really that interesting, I do not enjoy being the person who says, oh, I will talk and talk and talk, because I know it can be very annoying. So I've had this fear of annoying others, but actually I've realized recently that the reason, here I have to learn to love myself. I've learned this by reading a book about psychology, but also studying, watching Psyche to Go. That's a YouTube channel. I will put the link. I will write this. Psyche to Go. That's a great YouTube channel about psychology that the world owes to the Americans. Another thing that the world owes to America for the good. So I've realized that the reason why people are not interested, or I kind of embarrass them sometimes when I think I have interesting things to say, is not because what I say is embarrassing. It's embarrassing for them, but not because it's really shameful or something like that, but because actually I've realized, that's one of my problems, my level of consciousness, even when I talk about ordinary topic, is so far removed from the level of consciousness. Here I'm not talking about spirituality or metaphysics, but about culture, than other people, that I unconsciously embarrass them, not because in a shameful way, but because they feel kind of humiliated sometimes because they cannot keep up with the intellectual level. I've understood this, that I hurt others unconsciously by being too smart, and what is even more problematic is that I experience myself as being ignorant, because my standards in terms of culture and intellect, these are the standards of scholars, PhDs, historians, etc., in the sense that I can talk about the history of antiquity, but I feel embarrassed because I do not have the level of a PhD, or Edward Gibbon, or Montesquieu, or the great writers of the European tradition who have written about the history of antiquity. But these are my standards, and then the standard of the ordinary people. It's not here. It's not. I'm not judging them negatively. It's simply that for reasons of distribution of IQ, or problem of the educational system, or lack of leisure, the ability to have leisure, they simply they don't know even know what I'm talking about, because they haven't had the same life as I've had. Namely, I've spent 13 years trapped reading books, not 13 years, but 9 years reading books, and 13 years completely isolated. So I've understood it recently that I unconsciously embarrass others when I talk about things which interest me, because they feel downgraded, and so I am afraid to assert myself. But now I've understood that these are the kind of good aspects about me that I have to assert. But then I do not have to say, you are ignorant, you are stupid. I have to try to solve the problems of others, namely to act so that I can elevate their level of consciousness, their level of intelligence, their level of culture. That's what I've been trying to do in French and also in English on this channel. But no, I will consciously do this as long as I can. Yeah. Also, the lack of the presence of a father figure has led me to be unbalanced in terms of masculine, feminine, in the sense that I have been, and I still am, very feminine, not effeminate, but feminine, and I suffer from this because I am a male empirically, and I have a sense of pride, I don't know, but I lack masculinity. That's my singular problem, but that's the problem of most young Western males. They have become effeminate or feminized, and I understood in the United States, for me, they embody the archetype of masculinity. If Americans hear this, they say, "What? No, you must be kidding! Our males, they have become soft and decadent." No, but for me, the masculine. It has been the case. It was already true 4 years ago. Of course, masculinity for me, that's Rome, Sparta, Germany in a history, in a political history of the West. But actually, the US, for me, masculinity in the US, these are the pioneers of the 19th century, people who were self-made with their own resources. They conquered the continent, and they were self-sufficient, they were autonomous, they were daring, they were bold, etc. This is the kind of Jack London type of, I mean, Jack London, that was not the 19th century, but the kind of, that's the European spirit of America. For me, I associate very simply European spirit in America. For me, that's the 19th century. Then, early 20th century, it was the more, the business mentality, which has its good aspect as well. But yeah, for me, 19th century America, the exploration of the wilderness was the American, the European spirit in America. Yeah, there's a difference between the European soul and the European spirit. They are partly connected, but yeah. And today, I associate this manliness, this strength, this virtue. For me, it's not. Here I will be a little bit negative. It's not the bodybuilding people. That's not really masculinity. It can be because it requires will, etc. But for me, masculinity in the Anglo-Saxon world is embodied by someone like Ron Paul, Stephen Molyneux, because these are people who are consistent. Of course, they are not fighters with their fists, etc. But someone like Ron Paul, he's the embodiment of virtue and masculinity in a sense that he's been there doing his show for, I don't know, many years, and he's always repeating the same thing. No, actually no. But he's consistent, and he's really a man because he has principles, and he stands by those principles. And I admire Ron Paul. And for me, he's not the typical American. Yeah, he's the typical American as Americans ought to be, in my view. Yeah, Americans, not American citizens, because in America there can be citizens of various ideologies, etc. Precisely, this is what the American Constitution enables. But an American who behaves as an American, that's Ron Paul and Thomas Sowell and Daisy Luther and Charles Murray and partly Jeff Deist. That's how I envision things. That's the narrative that I've built, which is partly coherent. Namely, yeah, that's what I said to myself. Okay. Also, I have identified myself with God 4 years ago. And I have taken decisions over the past few months where I willingly chose very difficult, very challenging choices by self-limiting, like not reading books, not using, I have a printing, how do you call this, to print. I have willingly not used material object. I mean, I have a very, I mean, it's a good computer, but it's $600, poor camera, etc. I have willingly downgraded my level of material help. I look at my system, what it looks like. It's on a table board, etc. But I have willingly chosen difficulty because I thought that I was just negative and that I did not deserve, etc. But I will not. No, I will not change suddenly. Oh, I will invest, etc. No, but I have taken willingly very difficult decision, not morally, but in terms of self-limiting, like setting myself challenges, because I said to myself, but if I am really divinely inspired, or my spirit is the mind of God, or etc., I have to make things as difficult as possible just to have some challenge. That's my challenging self. So now I'm in an embarrassing position because the situation is becoming more and more complex. Here I'm in a mood to laugh, but yeah, but I have willingly made things very hard for myself, consciously. I have done this in a sense of self-punishment, but in a sense of also I've tried to be aristocratic. And I will still try to do, but it's difficult. Yeah. Then, also, what I suffer from is that... No, it's not that I suffer from. It's that what I enjoy, if I talk normally, I enjoy being appreciated, not for who I am, but for what I accomplish. That's my problem, is that I have always been appreciated by people in my empirical life for who I am. And the only genuine love that I have experienced is for my teenage sweetheart, who loved me for who I was, but not because she had to, but because she loved me for, that's the illusion that I had, she loved me for my partly my masculine self in a way. And I cannot, I have a problem. It seems silly, but actually it's very serious in a sense that that's a very deep religious struggle between what is and what ought to be, between acceptance and setting standards, between good and evil, because what is considered good is, oh, we have to accept tolerance, inclusion, etc. And what is evil is to say no under certain standards. It seems very silly, but actually that's Hillary Clinton versus Trump. Clinton is we accept everything. I simplify to the utmost. It's acceptance that Christianity in the simplified sense, and Trump is in the sense anti-Christian because he says no, we do not accept everything and everyone. You come in America, we accept you only if you do not steal, do drugs, or rape, do not wreak havoc, etc. There are standards. And it's considered in the modern Western world to be evil just to set standards and to say, okay, there are things which should not be tolerated. It's considered to be evil. And in this sense, this is an evil aspect of myself that I do not really feel guilty of if the standards are fair, because here it's connected with my empirical story. I have never... how should I explain? That's one of my other problems. Okay, it will be maybe a little bit more than 30 minutes, but I've understood a lot, and yeah. I'm not sure that I will make a lot of video in English, because I intend to do video in French as long as I can, but yeah. In my empirical life, I have a problem of hypocrisy, but on many levels, but on a level which is not really intentionally negative, I explain, in a sense that I tend to accept many things in others that I would not accept for myself if I really cared. I give an example, empirical example. In school, when others have difficulty, they have bad grades, etc. In my empirical life, I used to think, okay, that's not that bad, etc., etc. But actually, that's kind of hypocritical, because if I were in their position, I would not accept, I would not tolerate. And in this sense, I am hypocritical without intentionally meaning to be hypocritical, but that's why I can be very negative, because when I'm really interested in something, I invest myself fully and I do not tolerate failure. That's a psychological characteristic of my empirical self, and I realized that it's partly also true metaphysically, in this sense. I'm like Hegel, in a way. Hegel, when he criticizes Kant, the category of Kant, the table of categories, that's not very rigorous, etc. Sometimes I play the game saying, oh, it's not very serious, but actually there's an aspect of me who believes, really, like if you build a system, here that's my Hegelian identification, if you build a system, it has to be serious and rigorous, and failure and mediocrity cannot be tolerated. If you invest yourself fully and you do things seriously. In this sense, I can be a little bit of, I would say, a psychopath, but I can be a little bit of negative aspects, in a sense that if I think that something is worthy of investing in, it has to be perfect, or it has to be very good, at least, if I think it's worthy. And in this sense, yeah, this is my not psychopath, it's partly fanatical. Fanatical would be the proper way. But in my empirical life, what I've invested in, where when I was a teenager, when I was a young teenager, my school grades, then my love story, and then what I call my system, namely the philosophy of Hegel, the system. These are the things I've invested myself in. I've always been passionate, in a sense that whenever I invest myself in a field of endeavor, I invest everything, which is that's problematic. Also, when I think about my empirical life, just myself as an empirical individual, I am very critical because I see mostly failures, and the only thing I explain my development by providing psychological keys to enlighten. What I know on my empirical perspective, what is not a failure is my love story, my teenage romance. I mean, it has ended up not failing, but it has ended yeah, but while it lasted, it was wonderful. And in this sense, this explains why when I'm really desperate, I cling to this, because I said to myself, I had a great love story with a wonderful person who loved me, and I was not a failure back then. That explains a lot of my psyche. Then my accident in 2019, when I willingly self-sabotaged by jumping from the second floor, I broke my back, my feet, etc. That's not a failure for me, because I took a risk. I didn't know how much it would hurt. I knew that I wouldn't kill myself and that my head would not be hurt, but I thought that I would be paralyzed in a wheelchair for the rest of my life, and I was willing to take the risk. And it hurt a little bit, but I endured the pain. That's one of the things. Not everyone is willing to do this, so that's not a source of pride, but a sense of achievement. Like I took, and I'm still willing to take physical risk and to endure physical pain. Maybe when I suffer, I will say, okay, that was a bad idea. But in a sense, if I have to love myself, really, there is my love story as a teenager and my ability to take physical risk and to endure physical pain that I'm still willing to endure. At least theoretically, yeah. And also, to explain my psyche, when I can take, for me, taking risks, in a sense, I am really kind of weak and pathetic, but simply to talk to a person directly, to a masculine other, and to challenge him, not necessarily in a negative sense, but sometimes just to ask a piece of advice, and just to dare and go speak to a person, either a man or a woman, but simply to assert myself by imposing myself. Just for asserting myself, it gives a sense of thrill, and that's for me being kind of brave. That's because I'm really weak in a sense, but it gives a thrill, and it gives a sense of feeling alive. In the sense, to take risks, in this sense, for me, it makes me feel alive. That's an aspect of me. I have, over the past 13 years, I have felt the most alive in a higher sense, while taking risks, but not completely inconsiderate risks. That's what we call recklessness. But taking risks that I knew would not necessarily pay off, because these are risks, but were for the good. In a sense, to overcome myself, simply it sometimes just means to go and talk to people and to assert myself, etc. And in this sense, this thrilling aspect of life is really exciting. That's what fear, overcoming one's fear, can make you feel really alive on a higher level. Yeah. Also, I have a tendency to order. In my empirical life, I have had a conflict between chaos and order, because I will not make the explanation, but I have a tendency the will to order and to structure myself, my mind, my immediate environment, and in this sense, I have spontaneously the principle of order within me, but I have struggled throughout my empirical life to implement this, because I have, if I had to be positive, I would say I have a creative aspect, not as an artist, but when I work, I tend to that's the entropy. When here in my apartment, when I start to work to make a video, I pick books, I pick papers, I move objects, etc., and then it becomes chaotic. But it's an exteriorization of work and energy, which brings a temperature in physics. And then it's chaotic, but it's a chaos that has been brought forth because of work. And then I have the tendency, okay, now I have to reorder everything. So I have in my psyche, but these are cosmic determination in a sense. We find this in the very structure of chemical and the material world, on the level of atoms and molecules, etc. And this is the cosmic struggle between order and chaos. And in a sense, they are complementary in a sense that just when I work, that's an empirical example, but it's universally valid, I bring about chaos, not in a completely reckless manner, but because chaos is disruption of what is order, but it is what enables to produce, to create. That would be a positive view. And in a sense, I have had to struggle against my own inner chaotic tendencies by ordering myself. That's also an aspect that's yin and yang, order, chaos, but also the feminine part of the soul and the masculine. Within each man and each woman, there is a feminine aspect and a masculine aspect from a metaphysical level, and the feminine aspect would be the principle of chaos, because it's kind of not a chaos in the Joker type of I want to bring chaos. No, in a chaotic. Chaotic is like a lack of mastery. and the ordering principle would be more masculine. And in a sense, Bebe Rexha makes great song. It expresses the female psyche. I will. There is an aspect of what I call the female psyche, which is present even in empirically masculine, empirical males, but it's within everyone's soul in various degrees, various quantitative proportion. There is what I call a feminine aspect. Plato knew this, which is kind of irrational, and there is a conflict within the soul to try to structure and to restrain. That's the theory of the horse from Plato, partly. Yeah. And I have to struggle against my chaotic tendencies. Yeah. Also, I will talk a little bit longer, but I don't know how many times I will make videos in English. But I provide, like I said, pieces of light. I talk about my singular self. If the followers who have been following, they are intelligent in terms of IQ and wisdom. They are capable of extracting the particular, because as of now, the few followers that I have, they are mostly white, I guess. But eventually, if they are intelligent, they can extract. And if they have been following the channel, they are intelligent. You can extract the universal and the particular from my own personal empirical. Yeah, that's precisely. I will not do all the work saying, oh, my singular self, then the particularity, etc. You are intelligent. The other outside of myself watching this, you can think for yourself. Also, I have a tendency to self-humiliate. That's what I've been doing in many of my videos, by confessing all or almost all the embarrassing aspects of myself. I have humiliated myself over and over because I thought that, I still do, I am the negative, so I have to humiliate myself, to torment myself, and I do deserve in a sense, but I have, thanks to logic, I've remembered that the negative and the positive are united, and I'm just not negative, and I am also have positive aspects. So now I am willing to be judged, laughed at, mocked, etc. But I will say to people, as long as I talk, but what you say negatively about my character, my temper, I already know this. I've already said many times that I have many vices, many flaws, etc. So now I have listed all of them, that I've made them public. Now that I'm aware of that, what I can do is to work on myself to try to improve. And because if whoever you accuse me of whatever flaws, I say, okay, I know that it's part of me, but I struggle in a good sense, not in a sense it's difficult, but I struggle in a sense, I compete to overcome these. And as long as I live, as long as I breathe, as long as I act, I will improve myself. I will try to. I will probably fail, but I will try to. Yeah. Also, I've had a tendency to look down on psychology because from my metaphysical perspective, here it's really, I made a mistake, like completely downgrading psychology in the name of a super metaphysical principle inspired by Evola and Hegel, partly. I wouldn't say Nietzsche, because Nietzsche was a great psychologist, but this kind of Evolian aspect of being completely a complete derogatory view of empiricism. I mean, here it's a very shallow interpretation of Evola, but I've had this tendency to say, why bother with psychology? It's not Evola, it's actually Hegel. Pure metaphysics, pure logic, yeah. But actually I've understood that psychology, it's at the very beginning of the introduction, and the preface to the science of logic, the theory of the soul is included within metaphysics. So that what I mean here is that studying psychology, not studying, but reading books about psychology and watching video really has helped me in a sense that I am a mind, a spirit, and a soul. The soul is partly connected to the body, and I would say my interior soul would be my emotions, etc. But it's also the psyche of the brain. Here, it's really here. It's not very rigorous, but sometimes there's the psyche of emotions, and then there's the psyche of the mind. The emotional aspect, of course, it would be the heart, and the psyche of the mind would be the personality traits. The emotions would be more the heart. And then, here I will be honest, kind of the embarrassing honesty that I will not give up on is that there's also the psychology of, I understood this by reading the encyclopedia a couple of months ago, I guess, the sexual organs, namely, the subconscious is partly tied with the problem of the sexual organs, in the sense that there is a sex drive in humans and in me, and I've understood that to try to transcend this through various means of expression, because just sex, well, it's yeah, but the sex drive is what gives birth to creativity, for instance. So Nietzsche understood this. I have to be honest with myself. I have a sex drive, like every human, but I've attempted to transcend my sexual instinct to reproduce or to be attracted by attractive females in a purely intellectual fashion. That explains partly my psyche. So here I will be kind of, it's not self-humiliation. No, I accept this, that I have sexual problems, and I've attempted to transcend, unconsciously to transcend them by building a very complex system that I will not renounce to, but it has been a driving factor, in a poetic way. That's the life force, but I've understood in the month of July or June that it's partly tied with sex. Yeah, so, yeah. And my heroes. I have had many heroes, and I still do, and really my heroes, when I'm the most serious, these are Kant, Hegel, and Nietzsche, the greatest for me, a German metaphysician. And I still need them in a way. When I need strength, I really look up to Hegel, Kant, and Nietzsche. But growing up in life consists not in giving up on one's heroes, but to try to that they no longer are heroes, in a sense, to overcome them in a good sense. Yeah. Also about my apocalyptic moods. When I really experience anxiety, ontological trauma, despair, terror, I have apocalyptic moods, and this explains why when I'm really depressed, I said this earlier, what I really cling to is my love story as a teenager. That's here, if I had, I'm in a mood to be stable, but that's the Dementor in Harry Potter. That's my evil, in the sense that what is the most precious memory? My teenage romance, because I loved being with her, and she loved being with me. There had trouble sometimes, but it was genuine love, because we loved being with one another. And in this sense, I am evil because I love this memory more than anything else. In pop culture illustration, that's the Dementor, Spero Patronum, etc. What memory do I think of when I feel threatened or anxious? I think about this memory, not about any other memory. In a sense, this is what I love the most. I'd say, oh, that's good, that's noble. Yeah, but the consequence is that I talk about Stella. And here I will not introduce too much complexity, but I love my teenage romance, Louison, more than Stella. Although I know that Stella, the principle of Stella, is the principle which lived in my teenage romance. But here that's through a metaphysical mediation. But that's very complex. But simply, my evil, if I had not to defend my evil, but to explain an aspect of it, is that I love one memory more than anything else. And to love something more than something else is the metaphysical definition of evil. And what I call Europe is what reminds me of, probably unconsciously, of this love. Yeah. And then I associate Europe with the history, the culture, the tradition, and the anthropological people, and the soul of Europe, etc. And this is what I have rediscovered over my intellectual path over the past few years. Yeah. Yeah, also, here I have not fully understand, but I am on it. When I can speak in English and imagine myself talking to the Anglo-Saxons, namely white Americans, the English, or the Australians, eventually the Anglo-Saxons. But actually, I know that there are non-white who speak English as a native language in Nigeria, non-whites in former British colonies, etc., etc. And that's the universal language of mankind as a second language for most people. But nonetheless, I wrote, when I imagine myself talking to the Americans, for me that's a relief. Like it's it's kind of a I'm taking a, how do you call this? It's a leisure to talk to the Americans. When I talk to the French, that's a struggle. But in my view, precisely that's connected to what I said earlier, I have to accept the struggle, so it's kind of a sacrifice for me to make videos in French, but I have to accept. Could be worse or not, but because the Americans that I imagine talking to, they have the same cultural references, the same scientific references, those that I imagine talking to, and because the best people intellectually that I've encountered in my life, and my life has mostly been shaped by intellect, they are in America or they are Americans, and in the sense intellectually they are really the best, but the problem is that the pure intellect is kind of problematic, it causes suffering, but I will not renounce on this because it's the truth. In a sense, I really have intellectual and spiritual and even psychological admiration for, here I'm not talking about the average Americans, but what I call the European gods, Apollonian Germ, Caroline, etc., and Stella, because intellectually they really are the best. And yeah, and to talk in English, for me that's a relief, and to talk in French, well, and in this sense, I also noted that I suffer from German arrogance, and I'm intelligent enough to understand that arrogance is not healthy, confidence is healthy, arrogance is to balance a sense of worthlessness. So I have a doubled tendency. When I'm arrogant in the name of Germany, it's actually because I lack confidence. And I can be an arrogant German metaphysician and also an arrogant German nationalist, depending on who I talk to. And when I talk to the French and I have to find confidence, I use the German nationalist archetype. And when I talk to the Americans, the German metaphysical archetype. But actually they are kind of connected, but here that's a problem that I have not yet solved, and that is very difficult to solve, is that empirically, I'm a Frenchman, but I really do not identify with France because from a French perspective, I have a French culture, but from a French perspective, I'm partly resentful, which is a problem that I have to solve. I'm partly resentful against the French because I feel that I belong empirically to Germany. So there's the empirical Germany, and there's the metaphysical Germany. They are partly connected, but here it's really so complex that, yeah. Also, I suffer from multiple personalities and from many psychiatric problems, autism, psychosis, schizophrenia. I'm aware of this, and the American channels on YouTube have helped me solve my problem. That's here. I'm in a positive mood. That's my Spinozian ethos. Ethics, if you will, not the ethics of Spinoza, but the ethical aspect of Spinoza. Not in a ethical, in a sense, the curing aspect, to understand how one functions really is a relief. And here, a piece of advice that I can give is, do not read Spinoza, but simply, I mean, you can, but these psychological channels, like I've already put the link, probably Psych2Go, or I've made documents where I share psychological channels. They are really helpful because when one understands how one's psyches function, it's a relief. And I've been disdainful of psychology in the name of metaphysics, but actually no, it's liberating to understand. And in this sense, I will praise myself for the good. I've made videos on this channel, Eternal Light, about the white psyche, and I really think that I may be the greatest psychologist of the white psyche, although I never studied psychology. Really, I've never read a book of psychology, only a few passages. I don't know if I've dedicated more than a few hours in my life about reading about psychology in a psychological books, but precisely psychology is made manifest in human behavior. It doesn't have to be pure psychology. Precisely, it exists. Here, these are my categories. The essence exists. So psychology exists. It comes from the ground, which is the theoretical aspect of psychology, but it is made manifest in human behavior. In a sense, listening to Eminem is better than any textbook about psychology. But of course, there has to be both. But the psychology of of Marshall Mathers, or the songs by Lady Gaga, Avril Lavigne, Bebe, Rexha, Taylor Swift, etc., they are really great because this is an expression of the female or the masculine psyche. Then it has to be complemented by theoretical study, but yeah, that's what I had to say. Also, I am tormented by my inability to stand. That's the masculine principle. That I know this thanks to Stella and to Caroline. They are my inspiration when I'm in a struggle and I have to stand. I draw inspiration from them because they have taught me what women expect from a masculine figure, namely to stand your ground. And this is what I suffer from in my empirical life, because on the internet it's very easy, but in my empirical life, in face-to-face encounters, I have a tendency to flee, partly because I'm afraid, but also partly because I'm afraid to hurt the other, and I have to find the proper balance between being confident and not being overly antagonistic. And that's one of the problems that I would have to solve, and that's the reason why I know I will make videos mostly in French, because I have to solve my problems on an empirical level. That's the problem that I've suffered for. The universal and the singular, they are connected, and in this sense, I cannot go to the US and to solve the problems of America from the point of view of geographical America. I have to, here this is my current conflict. I have my universal mind. Of course, he's German, but in the realm of sciences, he's American, and even in the realm of culture. But I live in an empirical country, and I have to balance the two aspects, and that's what made me take the decision to now speak predominantly in French on a channel which is predominantly in French. But maybe I will make just videos in French, and if I make videos in English, if I intend to make videos in English on my French channel, I will actually publish them on this channel. I don't know yet, but this is what has motivated my decision recently, that I've understood that the reason why I've failed to communicate is because I have to speak on all levels, singular, particular, universal, and my singular happens to reside in an empirical country named France, and I am intelligent enough and I have a high enough culture to speak to the Anglo-Saxons with their cultural references and to the French. But here, the science and the culture, the modern pop culture of the Anglo-Saxon world is way above that of France and that of the rest of the world, actually. But France, there is, of course, a very high culture, a very high culture, in a sense that the great poets, the great writers, they are on a different level. So here there's also a conflict between my European self, which encompasses England, France, Germany, Italy, Greece, and Rome. Really, my European self from a cultural standpoint. I'm always European anthropologically, for good or bad, but I have a European self, which is cultural and sometimes religious and spiritual, which looks down on the Anglo-Saxons as some sort of renegades who left the culture of Europe to go and do business and become shopkeepers. I laugh, but actually that's a problem. That's why all the problems, they are within the European community, in a sense, which includes Americans, white Americans, of course. But in a sense, I have a tendency to be arrogant against Anglo-Saxons from a European perspective, and to be arrogant against continental Europeans from an Anglo-Saxon perspective, because here I have to be honest, the current level in the 21st century of the Anglo-Saxons in terms of sciences and even culture, etc., it's way above continental Europe. France, Germany, the level of the scientists, the research. Here America is so far above everyone else that, yeah. And I'm partly frustrated by the Americans who cannot see the brilliance of their own scientists. Yeah. Also, I wrote, I cannot tell others how to run their household if I cannot run an order of my own. It begins with clean my room. It seems really silly, but actually it's very profound, is that if my own immediate environment is not even structured, if I'm dependent, immature, irresponsible on a singular level, I cannot solve universal problems. That I have understood this recently, over the past week, I guess. And now I've decided to dedicate a significant proportion of my day to order my immediate environment, really my apartment and my room, and to solve really immediate problems, because this is the pinnacle, the bedrock, the fundamental, the foundation of everything else. And here, and again, that's UPS, but I will not become a cleaning lady. That's not derogatory. I've used the help of a cleaning lady. It has helped me a lot to order my library and my room, etc. But I have to become my own cleaning lady to be autonomous. Ideally, here I would say what I think. I would like to marry Stella, really empirically, to make Stella come here in France as a wife, but it's gonna be difficult. Stella, there's an insane person living in France who needs house cleaning. She would find this very funny, because she made video about being a good wife, etc. That's why she's so great, whatever I say. Yeah, also I am very intelligent. I suffer from an excess of intelligence, in a sense. I made here I explain some of my videos without having even watched them, but I take the time to rewatch some of my videos, but I explain, if people stumble upon this video and they stumble upon others, I will no longer talk about ethics. I mean, I still do, but I'm intelligent enough, partly in a cynical way, to understand that to talk about ethics is useless. The purpose of ethics is not to be discussed, but to be acted, to be made wirklich, to be realized. Yeah, in this sense, Kant has already said everything there was to say. I've never even read Kant. I mean, I've read partly the Critique of Pure Reason, but the Practical Reason, I've not even read Kant. That's why in a sense I'm super smart, and also partly is that I understand. When I say I get the idea, it means I get the fundamental determination without going into the complete reading, the thorough reading, etc. So in a sense, I've never read the ethical books written by Kant, but I know that to make lectures about ethics, there are countless to be found on the internet. The books by Kant, by Plato, by Stuart Mill, etc. Michael Sandel made lectures that I watched many years ago. It's already available. The purpose of ethics is to be implemented, and if you cannot implement your own ethics, do not talk about ethics. That's my ethical standard. And this is derived from Rousseau, Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Stella had a picture of Rousseau in her room. That's one of the things which made me fall in love with her. And Eminem as well, at least as I envision him. Rousseau used to say, do not talk about morality or ethics, but be ethical. That's the difference between the Athenians and the Spartans. The Athenians, they were great speakers about what ought to be done. The Spartans, they were silent, but they acted ethically. They were not great theoreticians. Of course, I have a tendency to be more theoretically minded, but Rousseau had a point here, is that act ethically. So now, I will no longer make lectures on ethics. I will simply say what I do, what I have done, and what I will keep doing. I've listed this a little later. Also, about playing a role. I will try not to, of course it's difficult, not to play a character. I will try to be me. There is enough darkness in me and evil and negativity so that I do not have to imitate anyone else. But eventually when I feel low in confidence, I use role models from American movies, etc. Or American pop culture, or even French. But I will try no longer to do this, and I've fell into the trap of religion, one might say, that I thought that I had to play the role of some religious books or texts, but in a way I have, but in a sense religion has to be transcended. Here I'm confident in the sense that to read the Bible or the Quran or the Kabbalah or the Hindu text word by word to be a commentator. I have done this for many months on the channel Cultural Hegelianism, to be just a commentator. Simply that I did not comment the Bible, I commented Hegel. But to be a commentator, it's pointless. In a sense, if people watching say, "Oh, you are anti-Christian, you reject the Bible," no, for other reasons probably, but the Bible, of course, it's, I would say, a great book. Of course it is, because the content here, even the intelligent theologians, here I'm confident, the intelligent theologians, whether they are Muslims, Christians, or Jewish, they understand that there are several layers of reading, and the message of the Bible is correct, but the interpretation, it doesn't have to be rigorously. I thought I had to do this up until a few months ago. In this sense, I am not a rigorous Christian. There are worse things, I guess, from a Christian perspective than not following, etc. Maybe in what I call the cosmic mind. Every verse of the Bible is true, but then every verse of the Quran, but then every verse of every religious book, even the pagan books. So yeah, but to be divine is a burden, but it also means to transcend religion. So in this sense, that's part of it's connected with my innocent hypocritical self, in a sense that when I look down on people, I say, okay, just read a religious book and do what they say. But would I want that for myself? I have wanted this when I felt in a position of weakness, but actually no. In a sense, that's my European self, and my story is coherent in a sense that those that I call the European gods, the revival of paganism, we or they or we are, as a community, are rewriting, recreating the European religion, which incorporates moments of most religions, of all religions eventually, but it's a it's a creation in a way of religion. It's not in the sense. That's why here I will be honest and setting praise. The modern pagans who revive the European religion. Here I do not dare say paganism when I don't have to, because the European religion, it's more noble. Paganism, it's kind of derogatory. What we here have in common, the European gods and goddesses, that we recreate, rediscover, or re-establish our own view of religion. It has to be in adequation with the teachings of most religions, but it's self-made. In the sense, the intelligent pagans, they are not the ones trying to comment every line of the Edda or every line of the writings of whatever they can find. But the modern pagans who comment every line of the Edda and who follow the Edda, I mean, it can be. Varg has done this, but in an intelligent way to interpret. But those who say, "Oh, I have to," the Edda is my Bible. No, it's mechanistic. It's as dumb as what I call the mechanistic Christians. It's good in some moment, because here it's the logic. It's better to know something mechanistically by heart without understanding, because it enables to go further. But it doesn't have to be. You don't have to stay blocked or to stay trapped in the moment of mindlessly repeating something because it's written in the Bible or the Quran. These are images. In a sense, I'm loyal to Hegel. Hegel says this is that the difference between philosophy and religion is metaphors are turned into concepts. In this sense, I'm consistent, and also about Hegel. That's what I wrote. The standards of Hegel, in terms of intellect, in terms of rigor, systematicity, in terms of I would say a quality, they are so high that I have been partly traumatized by Hegel for various reasons, but by the standards. In the sense, I have suffered, and I still do suffer from the standards are so high that I experience myself as being not good enough. This explains a lot of my psyche. Also, I've noted, to illustrate with pop culture, if I had to illustrate what I have suffered from, and I still do, about multiple personalities, what I've been talking about for an hour, the ventriloquist in Batman, the guy who is very shy and has a puppet, a doll of Scarface, not Tony Montana, but Scarface in the Batman comic books. It illustrates, I have this tendency, I have a very shy personality in some circumstances, and I create, unconsciously, I have created a very strong character inspired by Eminem, by the German metaphysician, to assert myself. So I have this bipolar, I have a multiple personality, but sometimes it's bipolar, namely the weak and shy aspect that I show usually in my empirical life when I'm confronted by people. And the more confident, and I have eventually to unite the two, namely not to be completely arrogant and not to be shy and feeling completely worthless, but to be in the middle, to be confident. And an illustration of this psychological, which is also a metaphysical divide, is the ventriloquist in Batman, but also here, this is part of growing up. I accept that teenage, only child cartoons have been part of my process. In Pokemon, when I was a kid, I watched Pokemon. Sabrina, the psychic master, that's a Pokemon at the early 2000s, late 1990s. Sabrina, psychic type, she had a doll, and that's the same thing. She had psychic powers, and she had a double personality. She was very cold, rigorous, indifferent as a person, and had a doll who was more kind and playful, and eventually they had to be reunited so that she could be cured, because she suffered from a divide of personality. Also, here it's a little bit more serious, John Kramer, the Saw franchise. Sometimes, when I'm more confident, I have a tendency, but I have to apply this to myself eventually, to say to others when I suffer physically or morally, and others they take everything for granted, but actually I have to apply this to myself. But I have the tendency to say, people sometimes are ungrateful to be alive. I have been ungrateful, I will still be ungrateful, but simply now I am more confident that there are small steps that I overcome. In the sense, now I am grateful really for every walk in the park, for every glass of water, for every night where I can sleep and rest. I am grateful. These are small pleasures in life, and in a sense I am grateful. I will not play the traumatizing, maybe I will when I'm in a difficult position, but simply what I say is try to appreciate life. Here I say this in a positive mood. People watching me, try to appreciate life for the, not only for the good aspect, first for the good aspect, and try to be grateful. I try to do this. I try to show gratefulness from some aspects. That's the beginning. To be grateful for everything, it's more difficult, but I try to be grateful for the good things. That's a first step towards growing up. Yeah. Also, yeah, then I say the kind of things, in order to feel congruent with myself, I borrow this from Stella. To be good, you have to feel good, you have to be congruent, all the aspects in coherence. I need to talk directly to people, face to face, and to talk about, I said this earlier, about embarrassing topics, not really the most embarrassing, namely the depth of my psyche, the psychoanalytical well, I will not go out in the street and talk about my psychoanalytical problems with the first person that I encounter, but talk to person that I have talked to empirically over the past few months, to talk to them about what is considered embarrassing, while not being embarrassing, like race realism, sociobiology, IQ. That's a first moment, and I do every day a little bit. I talk to people about moments of the truth without feeling ashamed. Like, there are differences in IQ within people. If you come and say, "Oh, you know, what are you saying?" I say, "No, sorry, you are being dumb. We have to accept this. That's how things are." That's partly liberating for me to be able to speak parts of the truth. Of course, it's very difficult because what is very difficult is to speak the truth, because it's an entire process. But that's kind of liberating. This is part of not being ashamed of oneself. Namely, I am willing to stand and to defend race realism. Then racism is more problematic, but race realism, sociobiology, IQ, etc., etc., because this is simply reality, and in this sense, this is my scientific self, and this is a means to solve problems, to acknowledge That's the Spinozian way of healing. Yeah. But I will not go out to make lectures about sociobiology as long as I can. I do this publicly, in French, etc. But if I encounter persons, I am now willing, or precisely what I am not, I suffer. But eventually I will have to, this is part of being who I am, to talk about the things that I enjoy talking about with anyone indifferently. But I will not take 4 hours with the first person that I encounter, but simply this is part of feeling free. There are more embarrassing things to talk about. That's the first moment, to be willing to talk about race in an intelligent way, because if it's not intelligent, it's stupid and it brings problems even worse. So in an intelligent way about sociobiology, race realism, IQ, and this explains why, as a Frenchman, empirically here, really in a kind of, I am so frustrated, I have been so frustrated, is that because it's not possible for cultural and even sometimes legislative reason to talk about certain topics. Talking about IQ and race realism, it's not strictly speaking forbidden, but there are the culture, which is enabled by the American Constitution, has not arrived in continental Europe. In a sense, the Americans, they are kind of privileged. For them, it's a burden to talk about race. But when you are deprived from the ability to express yourself, it's kind of a frustration. And in a sense, that's why America has been a breath of fresh air, of relief. It is. That's why, in a way, I love so much. I understand. I love so much America because it enables just to liberate the mind. And in this sense, all the humans, as long as intelligence can circulate on the internet, they have to be grateful to America, because there can be no liberation in complete ignorance. And the Americans, the world, owe them liberation, partly through the intellect. And in a Spinozian view, that's a liberation, so yeah. Also, about my psychological problems. Stella and Caroline, the two most intelligent women who go through the whole process, spiritual experiences, etc., they suffer from psychological problems, and I understand. PTSD, bipolar disorder for Caroline, and an alter ego for Stella. So in a sense, they suffer from the same problems as I do, and they have helped me cure myself. Eventually, I will be able to help cure them. Somehow, but this is why I love them so much, in a way, because they are like me for many reasons. But first, they inspire me strength and confidence, and the will to struggle in a good sense. And also, psychologically, they suffer from some of the same problems that I have suffered from. And in this sense, they really are perfect women. But perfection includes the moment of the negative, yeah. Then I just conclude. I repeat, it's just I provide keys to understand what I've said in some of my videos from my current perspective. 28th of October. It will, as long as I can think and encounter experiences, I improve. So my perspective will keep changing. But that's really my Spinozian self. To understand oneself is kind of liberating, and I provide a lens to clarify. Yeah. One of the problems that I suffer from is that what have I achieved? So I suffer from a lack of achievement on a singular level. I enjoy being resisted when I try to assert myself for the good. This is the playful. It's not always the case, but the playful mood with kind of, I imagine, with Caroline and with Stella, that's just imagination as of now. Or sometimes when another resists, but in a sense, okay, he resists or she resists because he or she expects me to improve. In a sense, I enjoy being resisted, and I haven't been very often. Sometimes resistance is really negative, it hurts, but when there's the proper balance, when it's playful, it's one of the most joyful human experience. That's the erotic tensions found in great movies when there is a chemical interaction, not chemical, I mean, it's partly chemical, chemistry between male and females, or when it's playful and joyful. It's not always the case, but in this sense, I fantasize about Caroline and Stella because they force me to assert myself, to overcome myself for the good, etc. And I have this aspect. This explains my attraction. In the sense that challenge for the good. The problem is that when it turns sour, it becomes bitter. That's bitter, sweet, sour. That's Jacob Böhm's metaphysics. He uses chemical and alchemical properties to describe consideration of the mind of God. I don't need to read Jacob Böhm, You've been aufgehoben. No, here that's my little bit arrogant say, but yeah, actually it's serious. In the book Hegel and the Hermetic Tradition, Jacob Böhm, the German metaphysician that Hegel criticized for being too sensuous, but he talked about the Godhead, the mind of God, as being conflicted between sour, like in sour sweet, or sour, sweet and bitter, and these are images which represent conflicts within the mind of God and within reality eventually. And of course, bitterness can be negative, sour can be negative as well, sweet is usually positive, but bitterness can be positive as well. It requires strength of character to appreciate bitterness. Here an example: drinking vodka. I'm not sure that it's bitter, but it's the kind of pleasure, it's a higher pleasure for those who know how to appreciate this. Reading great literature, great European literature, or great German music. Here I'm saying profound things. Sweet, it's usually the youth and when young people, they enjoy sweet things. One can enjoy sweetness throughout life, but it's mostly children, teenagers, and dumb adults, in a way, in a decadent society, who enjoy sweetness. Of course, one always needs an aspect of sweetness, but it's more feminine, youth, feminine, tenderness, etc. But when one grows old, one has to learn to appreciate the bitter aspect, to accept them in a negative sense, but to appreciate bitterness in a sense of, here, I do not drink cigar and drink vodka any longer, smoke cigar or drink vodka, etc. But these are examples, a cigar, drinking vodka, these are examples of higher forms of enjoyment for people with taste. Developing one's taste, here in the realm of hedonism, one might say, it requires, there are people who say, oh, I drink vodka because it looks cool, or smoke cigar because it looks cool. No, and there are those who really appreciate a good tobacco or good scotch or whiskey or good alcohol. I do not drink alcohol any longer, and I won't, but I just explained. Or those who listen to great music, German music, or great literature, there are those who do this out of a snob mentality to try to imitate a higher social group, and those who really have the intelligence, the culture, the experience, and the wisdom to really appreciate. In this sense, I've had a tendency to be snob, but by looking down on ordinary pleasure. Here I illustrate classical German music. I'm not saying that it's bitter, but it's in the sense that in order to enjoy Beethoven or Mozart, I mean, sometimes it's very easy, but some of the greatest pieces of music, spontaneously people are more attracted by pop culture that would be sweet, and classical German music that would be bitter in the sense of the positive. In the sense that it's much more difficult to appreciate really great music than pop music. But both are great, but it's a moment in the development, in a sense that I will illustrate with pop culture again. The Godfather, that's a great movie. And there are a lot of people who say, okay, it's great because everyone says it's great. But really, to appreciate the greatness of the movie, it requires intelligence, culture, experience, etc., etc. And ordinarily, people, if they had the choice between watching the Godfather movies or other movies about the mob, or other movies, they prefer where it's more thriving, etc. And the boring, that's the snob mentality, namely people who look down on boring movies. No, precisely. The snob mentality is not to look down, it's to look up to boring movie, to say, oh, I enjoy this movie, although I secretly think it's boring, but actually I pretend to love this because everyone else does, and it has a good reputation. This is stupidity. The intelligence consists in saying, movies who really have a great reputation, there is a reason. Books who have a great reputation, there is a reason. In this sense, I illustrate again, there are many people, very few people read great poetry, because people have lost even the ability to appreciate great poetry. But the reason why great poets who are predominantly European, that's European culture, high European culture, it really is great. And to appreciate high culture, it requires development, experience, growing up, maturing, etc., etc. That explains why I've had tendencies to look down on pop culture, although I love pop culture, but it's part of the process of growing up, is that at some level, here I will explain myself clearly. To overcome the snob mentality, namely to appreciate something because a higher group that someone wishes to belong to appreciates this, so to appreciate something just for its reputation, that's the wrong reason. If you do not understand why you appreciate something, then don't pretend that you do. I've had this tendency to be a snob. Yeah, that's not a sin, but that's a sign of immaturity. Yeah, in this sense, in the realm of philosophy, I'm not a snob in the sense that reading Kant, Hegel, and Nietzsche, which I don't, but I would like to. Maybe I will grant myself the right to do so. This is really a kind of intellectual pleasure for me. It's not snob in the sense that I really do appreciate reading very complex, very theoretical books. And then it has to be, and The Godfather I really enjoyed. I haven't watched the movie, but it's really a great movie. It's not boring, but don't pretend to love boring music or boring literature or boring books if you really don't, or if you don't understand. So in this sense, be yourself, but my view of being myself means trying to overcome myself. Here I'm talking about culture, but yeah. Because here, I will be honest. I will talk about my empirical psychology. When I dropped out of high school in 2009, in the following years, 2011 up until 2013, I was really a snob. Like I felt. Here it's a singular experience which can be particularized and universalized, depending on the level of intelligence of the people watching this, other than myself as an empirical individual. I really was a snob in a sense that I tried to be interested in high philosophy or high literature because it was cool, and because I felt a sense of being degraded by not having a diploma. So the psychological impulse to read Dostoevsky, Steinbeck, Hemingway, Nietzsche, and to get interested in philosophy was snob mentality. But now, if I reread some of these authors, I would find... Or Zizek. When I was in my early 20s, I listened to Zizek and read his book because he looks cool, etc. No, I haven't reread Zizek, although I partly have, but no, I respect Zizek for the intellectual content. The jokes, they are still funny, sometimes, most of the time. But now I look at Zizek differently, because he really is a serious thinker who suffers from being misunderstood. So now I respect Zizek. I used to admire him. Now I respect him. That's part of evolution and development. So if you here I have to be proper judgmental. No judgment to have the proper judgment. If you are young and you suffer from this, if you watch this video, you don't have to. If you are smart enough, you can grow quicker. If you are older than 30 years old, you are a little bit decadent if you have not understood this. I give you the tools, you better fix yourself quickly. No, but seriously, that's part of growing up, namely, to try to prevent others from making the same mistake that one did, while allowing room for making errors. Because being completely rigid, that's really the negative German aspect that I partly have. No, there has to be a room for making errors. That would be the yin and yang, the round white circle within the black part from the father archetype, namely, okay, to be rigorous and authoritarian while allowing a little bit of room for errors. So concretely, what it means is that the few people who watch this, when they watch this, if I'm 30 years old officially. If you are younger than 30 years old, if you can understand what it took me many years to understand more quickly, good for you. I would be, if I had to judge people, let us imagine, I would be more demanding with older people than with younger, because, But actually, if I have to be demanding, follow my piece of advice in terms of psychological development. For the good, Okay, what I've written next here is, I have a tendency to tolerate incompetence because I feel myself not competent enough. But I have encountered in my empirical life people who are not competent, and I have been reluctant to tell them, because if I look at myself, I have been incompetent. Or when I have been competent, being intellectually at a high level, whether I do metaphysics or any other field, I feel, okay, it's not my own credit because I have a high IQ. But actually, now I will tend, as long as I have to speak, I will tend to be more demanding, because I have been very demanding with myself and my low standards, the poor quality of my video that I consider when I speak ordinarily. It's not because I cannot do better. It's because when I really tried to be rigorous and systematic, I understood it's not the proper way of communicating. But the videos when I speak here, that's in a sense partly what I said earlier about identification with God and trying to set myself challenges. I've tried to make videos while talking ordinarily to make accessible my content. I willingly make intellectual hardships on myself by lowering my expectations. At some moment, I had plans, I followed the rigorous line, etc. Then I started to say, okay, I no longer read Hegel's books. I no longer read my notes. I no longer edit my videos. So I set myself intellectual challenges constantly. So in a sense, I sabotage myself, but there is negative self-sabotage that would be ethnomasochistic left-wing tendencies from the white perspective, and there is what I call aristocratic self-sabotage. It's simply I lower down my level because I know that I am partly negative, so that the others might compete in a way for the good, etc. So in this sense, I have grown more confident because I have become wiser. I will no longer try to maybe it's too late, and that will be my problem, but I will no longer sabotage myself willingly. I will say, okay, I speak ordinarily, I develop my intellectual content. If there has to be competition, if I have to upgrade the level intellectually, I can. Then to stand morally and to endure the physical consequences of antagonism, etc., that's another problem. But on an intellectual level, I am becoming more confident, not because of inherent quality, but because of my own choices. Namely, in this video, for instance, I talk randomly. I mean, I've taken a few minutes to take notes, but what I want to say is that connected to the question of incompetence, my videos recently have been less and less structured consciously, but it's not because I cannot do structure, it's because when I do, it's way too complex. But now, if I have to talk to people in my empirical life or directly to people, I will be more demanding if I have to, in terms of structure, order, and competence, because I can be very competent. Here, it's not arrogance, it's simply a sense of self-worth. If I want to, I can be very competent in what I consider is the most important. And in a sense, if I am demanding with myself, I grant myself the right to be demanding with others that I consider, that's how I function psychologically. So here I said, I will not make lectures on ethics any longer, because I try to implement ethics. So here, the small victories that I have achieved in my empirical life. I used to smoke cigarettes. I no longer smoke cigarettes, no longer buy cigarettes, no drugs in the ordinary sense, cocaine, etc. No drugs, no cigarettes, no porn. I used to watch a lot of porn and to masturbate. I no longer do this. Sweets. I've given up on sweets of all kinds, soft drinks, etc. Fat and sugar, no longer. Industrial food, I've given up. Except organic, when I make supplies, it's organic. It's industrial but organic. But I try to give up on plastic, pollution, etc. I try to, here that's not the proper example, but I no longer buy, I try to limit the amount of plastic that I buy. All the commodities, the worthless commodities, I've given up on this. Clothes to look nice, I used to have this it's not a sin, but this problem, I want to impress others by looking good. I've had this flaw. I no longer care, I mean, still in a minimum way, but about my physical appearance. I used to be very worried about the quality of my skin. This has played a dramatic role in my development. I no longer care about looking good. I put a little bit of light to look good, but I'm more confident. Dressing nice and investing in makeup. I haven't done this, but I thought maybe I would have to. Everything on the aesthetic aspect. Here, that's asserting myself without trying to please others. My videos, I thought maybe I could make a very aesthetically pleasing video. I really don't care. If people on this level, if we are really different, if I cannot reach people because they cannot sustain a minimum of attention when I speak about serious topics in a accessible way, and if for them, here, that's part of my negativity that I'm not ashamed of. Namely, I understand that I have, as long as I speak, to make my thoughts intelligible to people of various cognitive abilities, various social status, various level of education, and I will try not to be completely resentful with my failure to communicate and to share my knowledge in an intelligible way with as many people as possible. But I will not sacrifice here is maybe just an opinion, but in my intellectual development, I've been interested mostly in people who just talk in their video with no editing, footnotes to Plato, Caroline, Apollonian Germ, Stella when she made video, the people who have Varg, the people who have played the most important spiritual influence and partly intellectual, the real people who have influenced me intellectually the most, not the authors of the books that I have, but the real people in this sense. And even someone like Peterson and Zizek, they do not make editing, in the sense that the aesthetic aspect is kind of really deceiving. Here, that's my platonic self. I'm really focused on the interesting ideas, and I'm willing to listen to someone talk if he or she has interesting things to say, and I don't need all the pleasing aspect, the montage, the editing, etc. And in this sense, I will not make this, and if people if they cannot get the best idea that I share because they need, for the really young people I can understand, but if people they need colors, there are countless videos on the internet with great aesthetic presentation. I will not do this consciously. That's part of being who I am, namely if people I share great ideas, if they cannot sustain attention although I make efforts to make accessible, I will, as long as I make video, it will be more and more accessible in terms of ability to communicate, especially because I will speak in French mostly, and it's much easier for me to I master the French language more than the English language, obviously, but what I want to say is that this is part of asserting myself and trying to please the others at the expense of sacrificing what I consider is an aspect of me which is not negative in a shameful way. Namely, I'm interested in intellectual content and the ability to focus. I know it's partly tied with a high IQ, but if low IQ people, if they really need just colors and pictures and drawings, I have done this, I will keep doing this, but if really it has to be a cartoon for adults, here I really say, okay, I will not do this. So here that's my negative self. That's really my negative in a sense for others. If others, they are not capable of sustaining attention when interesting ideas are being shared in an accessible way. I am guilty of having been completely lost myself in metaphysical abstraction, which are completely unintelligible for ordinary people. But now that I've understood this, that's part of the Spinozian. You understand your own determinism, your own errors. As long as you are free, or you believe that you are free to act, you can improve yourself. As long as I will speak publicly, I will try to be as accessible as possible on an intellectual level without falling into I have to make a lot of colors, a nice presentation, etc. I will not mess up completely willingly the formal presentation, but here I will not I have the lights. I try to write intelligibly, etc. But I will not work on the aesthetic aspect. In a sense, I really I'm really like Plato, or yeah, I really care about the intellect more than the sensuous. Yeah. Also, I renounce comfort. I've always had this tendency throughout my adult years, but no, I will not go back. I will not consciously self-mutilate willingly for the sake of trying to impress the puritanical Protestant ethics. If I have to be mutilated, I accept, because I have sent a lot of negativity, but I will not do this consciously myself, cutting myself, whipping myself. I thought about this. This is really insanity when it's not, yeah. So I just renounce comfort. Not, here I use Nietzsche, it's not in a self-mortification way, it's really because I enjoy detaching myself from the material world, but not in a sense, oh, everything is worthless. No, I need, as of now, technology, and I value technology, which is owed to mostly American engineers, but I really don't care here, again, that asserting myself in an aspect which can be embarrassing to others, but I will no longer be ashamed of, namely my ascetic self. This is how I have grown up to become. In a sense, I am really not really that interested in the materialistic aspect. I have been in aspects of my life, sugars, fast food, the pleasures, etc. But I no longer am. I really have an ascetic tendency, which is healthy. There is the unhealthy asceticism, but I've grown to be spontaneously ascetic. And as long as I can, what I enjoy from the material world is, of course, technology, which enables to share knowledge, reading books, and the logistic infrastructure which enables the circulation of information, etc. But there are many material objects that I'm really not interested in. And in this sense, I will praise myself for an aspect which is considered negative by a lot of people. It's not to say, oh, I'm good, etc. It's just I have understood problems about myself and I cure them as long as I can. My relationship to money. I have been disdainful of money because I have always been privileged, not very rich, but I would say lower middle class. I've never lacked money. I've always had all I wanted materially. I've never lacked money. And recently, because a legacy and because my accident, so I have an over amount of, I have money in excess. So in a sense, I understand myself that I can be disdainful of money because I have never been in a position, or I have to work 50 hours or even 40 hours a week, or have 2 jobs or 3 jobs to have a miserable paycheck, etc. I've never found myself in this situation. So I am intelligent enough to understand that the people from this perspective, those who are really poor and who suffer from a lack of money, to be disdainful of money from their perspective, that's really a lack of respect. And if I have done this, or if I still do this, it's my immature self, and I deserve to be judged negatively. But then I have another aspect, namely I am disdainful of money in a sense of I never have been really a materialist. Partly I have with video games at some moment, but it was more in a, how should I explain it? In the sense that to be a materialist in the ordinary sense, it's very easy for me to detach myself, in a sense that what I love in life, if I do not have to overcomplexify, is really to have a simple life and to use my money to buy books and read books. I will not do this any longer, but in this sense, I am spontaneously not a materialist in the ordinary sense. I have been, but partly, but in a sense, I'm really not very attracted by the idea that the purpose of life is to maximize pleasure. I used to do this just last year, etc. But for me, knowledge and a simple life is really an ideal, and in a way has always been. So in a way, I'm still true to myself. In a sense, minimalism or asceticism, I do not have to force myself. Or slightly, but it's not. There is the. Here I will try without into too much complexity. There is the puritanical aspect, which would be self-negation in a sense of those who are negating excessive of asceticism from the Nietzschean perspective. That's a problem. That's the symptom of a problem. If you have to mutilate yourself, you really suffer from not just from your physical pain, but you really have a problem. It's not by I mean, partly if it can help, but you really have a problem. If you feel the need to constantly mutilate, that's problematic. I will not say, oh, no, I'm afraid of physical pain. No, I will welcome, I mean, it will be probably unpleasant, but I've understood that I will not be an excess of asceticism, that's the proper measure, but good asceticism is simply to say, okay, there are many things in the material world which are really useless and that I don't care about. And in this sense, if I have a tendency to judge materialists who are wealthy, relatively people who really are interested in materialism in the ordinary sense, these people, I will say to them, well, what you are interested in, I'm not interested in. I have been, but I no longer am, and in a sense we are different, and you are an aspect of myself that I don't really like. I have to because, yeah, but I will not, yeah, so in this sense, it's coherent because all the people that have been surrounded intellectually or even empirically, they have not been a materialist in this sense. Although they have not necessarily lacked money, but materialism in the sense of excessive, I will not play the role. I don't need that. About cold showers, here I really enjoy taking cold showers. It's kind of a struggle because it's not very pleasant, but it's stimulating, and this is part of the aspect of asceticism which are good, namely to train the will. It's really low level, but to be able to endure the cold, to endure hardships, physical demand, it's really stimulating, and in the sense I spontaneously enjoy. It's really simple, but to overcome myself daily in little challenges, physical challenges, in a sense, I encourage males, whoever they are, to, here I really do, males. No, first I will list those, and then I will say what I expect from people watching this, whenever they watch this. Say, I no longer buy cultural products, books, video games, of course, but movies, etc. Cinema, I haven't been to movies for years and years. I don't watch TV. So the cultural products, I will know. Maybe I don't. I think I don't need to. I listen to music on YouTube as long as I can, and I enjoy this, and I enjoy discovering new artists, or etc. But discovering new cultural products, it's not really interesting for me. What I do is, through my philosophical perspective, I reinterpret my past cultural experiences. Namely, I reinterpret the books that I've read, the movies that I've watched, the video games that I've played. For instance, if I am in a position to be peacefully alone while thinking without too much trouble, I will grant myself the right to think about Zelda games, because there is really a great philosophical interpretation to be made. I started to talk about this on the channel Cultural Hegelianism probably in March of 2022. I understood vaguely, but now with my intellectual progress, maybe I will grant myself, if I find myself in a position, to think for 1 hour or 2 or maybe more about the philosophical interpretation of Zelda games, unity, plurality, identity, difference, what makes it such a good series of games, etc. That would be the kind of joy that really here, that's for not the aristocratic intellectual elite, but partly maybe people who can find. Because if people have to here, that's logically determined. That's the bad infinite in logic, namely, if you always need more and more. No, that's not the bad infinite. That's infinite quantitative, the mathematical infinite. If you always need to consume more books, more movies, more video games, more whatever people enjoy when they have leisure. If you always need a quantitative increase, there is a problem, because that's a contradiction which has not been solved. And here I will use speculative logic to really, that would be an addiction. To overcome the addiction, there are worse addictions to have, but would be here the people who follow the channel, I expect them to be knowledgeable. That's the difference between the mathematical infinite, namely always go further and further, and it always reappears. Always, I've read 5 books this week. Now I will read another 5 books the next week. Or I've played, I've bought 10 video games this year. Now I will buy 15 or whatever. they always need more and more and more. That's the negative infinite. The good infinite would be to be oneself in the other. In this sense, it would mean to reflect upon one's past experiences instead of going. I mean, maybe it's too late, but what I should have done, or what I advise people to do whenever they watch, instead of reading 5 books per week, or watching 5 movies per week, or playing 10 video games per month, just take 1 or 2 or 3 and meditate upon them through the mediation of my teachings, my intellectual teachings. In a sense, that's letting go of the good aspects without resentment, without too much attachment, namely keep in your mind the interpretation of the best things. In this sense, of course I would be kind of not disappointed, but there are worse things to let go of. But there are so many great movies that I could have watched, or video games that I could have played, but just to reflect upon the cultural experiences that I've had without feeling the need to acquire new ones, that's enough. My memories, the interpretation that I can give, the extract that I can find on YouTube, as long as I use this medium of communication. And I encourage people to do this. People who are older, get rid. You will have to eventually at some moment. Either everything will be reconnected in the cosmic totality, but eventually on the material plane you will have to let go. So if you do this willingly, peacefully, it will be easier. So what I encourage people to do, I said disconnect from the economic system step by step. It's impossible because everything is connected, but simply not participating by letting go of many material objects, cultural products which have become useless. I don't know if maybe it's too late. It should have been told earlier, but there are people who told this. I drew inspiration from Varg and the minimalist, the preppers, and simply the people who say simplify your life. They have spread pieces of advice to many people on the internet. I have failed to grasp these pieces of advice, maybe in time or maybe not, I don't know, but I will detach myself every day more and more from the material world, not in a completely nihilistic, Buddhistic way, but I really simplify while appreciating the good aspects of technology, books and the logistic system, but I do not contribute any longer in whatever I consider negative within the economic system. I keep it to a minimum. That's what I do. So, I will conclude by saying what I recommend people who watch this, at this one probably will be 10 people who will spend more than 140 in the coming hours or the coming days. There will be very few people, but I am confident enough to give recommendations because I expect this from myself. So you are probably at this moment after the 28th of October, in the coming hours or days, a young white male probably. I expect you to be a minimalist, to simplify your lifestyle, to do the good things that I've done in my video that I do. I will not say you should do, but in a way I expect you to do so. If you are white, if you are a male, if you are young, depending on your age, maybe things... it took me many years. I'm 30 years old officially. It has taken me many years and I still have to improve a lot. But my teachings, if I have to teach ethics, is do the good things that I do. If you can gather the knowledge that I wish I had many years earlier, if I can inspire you for whatever time there remains to live on Earth, that's good. That's what I can say. I share my experience. I don't know how long I will live empirically. I don't know, but now I have found. I have found what is right. Maybe I should have done this earlier, and it's too late. I don't know. Or if it's not too late, I have found what I think is right, and I will implement this level of righteousness until the end. In a sense, I will no longer. Maybe if somehow by a holy miracle, I am allowed to buy a few books, not on Amazon, but maybe I will grant myself the right to buy new books. But if I cannot, I will try to live without resentment, because I have enough books, and I will keep listening to music on YouTube. Really, it's great, and I recommend people. I have already recommended people to do this, but yeah, because you are an aspect of me. You are a mirror of myself, and I try to be consistent. I can only expect consciously from others what I expect from myself, and I'm more demanding with Europeans, anthropologically, white people, because I am European, and in a sense, I have experienced this empirically recently, that I am really more demanding with whites, and the requirements that I have eventually from non-whites, they derived from my requirements from whites. In a sense, I feel less guilty when white people suffer, because I have to suffer, I still have to suffer. I feel less guilty if they suffer consciously than if non-whites suffer. Instead, that's the ambiguity, that's partly logically determined. I have more expectations from whites, which is kind of, it's not racist. It can be told, oh, you are racist, you are demanding, you have less demands for non-white, but there comes the good and the bad with no moral judgments, or subsequently, but simply to be more demanding means to have, I have a higher view of whites, but it means that I'm more demanding. So it's kind of ambiguous. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. In this sense, see, I am consistent, like I expect more from whites, from Europeans, and I have less expectations from non-Europeans, which can be thought for good. It means I am less disappointed, but for bad, it means that you have a less expectation, you consider them less. So that's the ambiguity, that's yin and yang. And it means also that I value Europeans higher, but the counterpart is that I expect more, because I am European and I expect more for myself, and eventually I can only be disappointed by myself, and I have been very disappointed, precisely because maybe I have been very disappointing. But now I'm in a process to start to love some aspects of myself, and yeah. So that's what I could say. And finally, to conclude, the experience of reason, the consciousness of the whole of reality, I do not fully understand, but I used to think many years ago, and I still do sometimes, to try to be thankful to God. The others watching this, if I, as of now, as I can express this, because I have my own problems to solve, and from your perspective, try to live as if the world was your own world. That's what I've tried to do more or less consciously for many months during the past few years, and it has tormented me, because I see all the problems, all the struggles, all the negativity, and I still do, and I still suffer from this, and this is what I suffer from. But also, just to go outside, or not anywhere, but to imagine that the world is your world. Here I talk to another. That's the perspective of reason, which means the sun, the sky, the mountains, the rivers and the trees. That's nature in your general sense, but not just that, the buildings, the people, the books, the achievements, everything. Imagine that it is your production. It's very difficult because there is a lot of negativity, but imagine that the good aspects, they are reflections of yourself, and trying to live like a god amongst men is eventually to accept everything, the good and the bad, but that's to have a full experience of life maybe. And about the bad, my motto, I'm not sure that I'm allowed or I can, but I will no longer say, is that the bad that I don't like, I accept that it is what enables the good, and also I work on myself as long as I can to improve myself, so that I can say to the bad aspects of existence, look, it has been a part of me, I have worked on myself, no, you are part of my reality, but I don't really care because I have worked on myself, I have improved myself. That's what I said to myself. In a sense, judging people is negative, and they throw back negativity at you when you judge them negatively, but sometimes judgment is fair, and I have been very critical, and I will have to be judged by others, but no, I will also judge others in a more wise way, namely, all that I've been talking about for almost 2 hours, namely, I have achieved very few things, but now, I just illustrate now when I encounter persons who smoke cigarettes, I will not annoy people, but if I find myself where I have to talk to someone who smokes or who drinks alcohol or etc., I will try to be, in my empirical life, I will try to be diplomat and say, look, I've been through the same hardships, I have overcome this hardship, it has taken me many years, but now from my position, these are very small victories, but a small victory is still a victory, and I would say, no, pick yourself up on the small things that I have succeeded in overcoming, and spend the rest of your life trying to improve yourself, like I have done and like I will do. Then I have to be proper in my judgment, because people vary in intelligence, education, wealth. This is what becoming wise means. I don't know if I will be wise someday or at the proper time, but I've understood this. No, I've spent 2 hours almost sharing my views. Now I will work to produce videos in French. I don't know what's gonna happen because it's so complicated, but what I said, the story that I tell myself now is I have to solve problems. Eventually I have to solve problems, really, because I suffer from a lot of problems, and I cannot solve problems without freely expressing myself, which causes a lot of contradictions in my reality, but I have to express myself freely, so I have to stand for free speech in the country where I find myself. It sounds good, but the problem of free speech is that I have then to be responsible for all the things that I've said. So that's my problems. But I wanted to communicate with what I imagine are American followers, and or universal actually, but in English. And yeah, so I will learn to love some aspects of myself that I consider my own, it being my own struggle, and I will keep struggling against myself to overcome myself. And probably there will be more failures, but at least I have improved on some aspects, and as long as I live, as long as I breathe, I will be confronted by struggles and difficulties and hardships, but I will keep trying to improve. Yeah, I don't know how many videos I will publish on this channel in English. I consciously intend to publish videos in French in the coming days, but yeah, I've provided the keys, some of the keys, the current keys to enlighten retrospectively some moments of my process. That's what I could say. Yeah. So thank you, and now I will. It's 23:24 p.m. I will. I've slept before. I will work in the middle of the night. That's not very healthy, maybe, but I feel in a mood to work, to order my environment. Yeah, and we'll see tomorrow. So yeah, that's what I wanted to share at this moment.